All right, everybody, welcome to the Monday, June 5th, 2023 Rules Committee meeting. It is
Recording in
5
progress.
p.m. On the dot. Considering one of our agenda items today, I wanted to make sure as chair that I started on time. So here we are. First up, we have call to order. So if we can, for the record's sake, just roll call in quickly.
Councilmember Kelly,
Here.
Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Nguyen, Councilmember Nusma,
Here.
Councilmember Burns,
Here.
Councilmember Sufferton, Councilmember Ravel,
Here.
Councilmember Reed, Councilmember Harakaris,
Here.
Mayor Biss.
Here.
All right, we do have a quorum. Next up, public comment. Do we have anyone online that would like to make a public comment? Are you controlling that, Luke?
Mike Bassilko signed up on
What's the, you said Mike is signed up? Okay. We have one public commenter. We will start public comment in a moment. We're trying to remove something from the screen so we can see you. Oh, they can't hear either. You want to start over? Let the record reflect, we started at 5 p.m. on the dot, but we're going to go through this again because we're having some technical difficulties with the audio. So we'll roll call in.
Councilmember Kelly,
Present.
Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Nguyen, Councilmember Nusma,
Here.
Councilmember Burns,
Here.
Councilmember Sufferton, Councilmember Ravel,
Here.
Councilmember Reed,
You just.
here, Councilmember Harakaris,
Here.
Mayor Biss.
Here.
All right, and with public comment, we will start with Mike Vasilko.
Thank you. Just two quick comments, R3 and R4. R3, I don't think the council needs a civility pledge. Actually, I think robust exchanges between council members is what democracy is all about. Being cordial and all of that is fine, but if somebody is emotional about an issue, they should be able to express it. So I would say no to R3, R4. I'm not sure I understand it entirely, but I hope you're talking about donor matching to prevent, as we've had previous mayors who have bottomless pockets and can buy an election, that this ordinance that you're considering would allow a competitor enough funds to compete. So that's what I hope this is all about. Thank you.
All right, and is there anyone in person that would like to make a public comment? Oh, sorry. We have Tricia Connolly next up.
Hello, Tricia Conley, Second Ward. I just had a couple quick things to bring up. R2, I hope this gets passed. I went back to May 10th, and it was clear to me that on May 10th, there was some push to drive some things through from the last council, the 80th council. And you know, two items were both for introduction as well as vote, and two items were for introduction. So shouldn't have been happening at the very last meeting of the 80th council. And to avoid that, you know, if so be it, people have things they want to get in the pipeline, they should go through the referrals process. So I hope that all of you will pass that this evening. In addition, the civility pledge, along with Mr. Vasilko, I feel the same. This is about democracy, and you all should certainly get I'm sure you're all aware that in our history and, more recently, things change because people speak up and out, and it's not always civil. It's passionate, it's to the point, and who decides what looks civil? I mean, this is pretty ridiculous, if you ask me. So I hope that gets voted down because this is a bit ridiculous. I mean, you're all adults. Figure out what you need, ask for it, and take it from there. And the last thing I would say, the idea about donor matches for mayors, I like that in spirit. I don't know that I understand all the details, so I'm looking forward to hearing about that. But I just want to point out in this last election, this special election, in the second ward, one person was outspent, 3 times the amount. So beyond mayor, this is a concern I think we should take up as a city for all positions, because we all know we've got some, deep pockets and big money in this town, and there's a few players that get to kind of push, the initiative and push in our elections, and it's not okay. So thank you for your time.
Would anybody else like to make a public comment? All right, seeing none, we move on to approval of the December 5th, 2022 regular Rules Committee meeting. If I can have a motion for approval.
So move.
And is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been properly moved by Councilmember Newsome and seconded by Councilmember Reed. Any changes? Councilmember Harris.
Hi. I just want to go on record to say that I will not be voting, as there hasn't been a rules and I was not on board yet. So there has not been a rules committee meeting since I've been here in September.
All right, any other comments? Seeing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstain.
All right, the minutes are approved. Moving
Then I will
on.
move approval of the minutes from the October 3rd, 2022 regular Rules Committee meeting.
Second.
All right, it's been properly moved by Councilmember Newsome and seconded by Councilmember Reed. Any changes? All right, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions?
I abstain for the same reasons.
All right, one abstention. These minutes are approved. Moving on to items for consideration. If somebody wants to move item R1, please.
I'll move item R1, Rules of the Commission on Aging and Disabilities.
Second. Properly
Properly moved by Councilmember Kelly and seconded by Councilmember Reed. Who wants to start off with discussion on this? Rules on Commission of Aging.
It may be one of those straightforward items that
Straightforward?
Yep.
I'm just wondering
Councilmember Newsome.
why is this committee any different? Rules Committee hasn't approved chairman of any other committees or BCCs. Why does this one come to us?
Allison Leipziger, Policy Coordinator. That's because this is a brand-new committee, and they just needed somebody to appoint a chair so that somebody could gavel in and start the whole thing.
All right, any other comments, questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays, any abstentions? All right, the ayes have it. R2. Can someone move item R2, please?
I'll move item R2, Resolution 4R23, amending City Council Rule 1, adjournment to add Rule 1.3.
Second.
It's been probably moved by Councilmember Kelly and seconded by Councilmember Reed. Starting with discussion, we have Councilmember Reed.
Yeah. This one, too, might at face value seem straightforward, and I agree with the well, first, I heard Ms. Connolly's public comment earlier, and it seems as though if that is, her outcome is that a council couldn't essentially pass things on the last day of their term, this rule doesn't seem to achieve that goal. And so I'm just curious if that is the goal. And then two, if that's not the goal, what is the goal and how does this achieve that goal?
Councilmember Kelly.
Yeah, I agree with you, Councilmember Reed. I don't think this would achieve that goal necessarily. It might, in fact, give impetus to suspending the rules and having intro and action on the last council meeting. But I think the idea here is to start, I think this is really just operationalizing what's normally standard procedure in most public bodies, that we don't, as a representative body that are elected, that we're not taking up public time and debating referrals and ordinances that were put forward by a previous council. It's pretty simple and straightforward. I mean, I will say what personally brought it to my attention was the debate about the elimination of the Board of Ethics. And when we carried that forward and was discussing that, that was one of the things. But I mean, it'd be the same way now. For example, I have, put before Finance and Budget, the Payment in lieu of taxes task force that will hopefully sometime come before council. But like if that never did, that would then die and would not be carried forward to, and that's basically the idea.
Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. I think this rule is totally in order, but I will note, and Councilor Cummings, please opine if you have anything to add, but as far as law is concerned, the council is a continuous body. So there isn't, yes, there's a 84th or whatever it is council, but it's just one body moving forward. And so I do think this makes sense. I know some of us are familiar with the tree planting or the sidewalk planting, or there's an ordinance that came before us that was introduced by the last council that did stir up some concern in the community, and so maybe we can avoid that. I'm fine moving forward with this.
Councilmember Ravel.
Well, I was trying to think of examples where I would, I guess, have a question. So, for example, on a number of occasions, we've had an issue that we've forwarded to, for example, the Environment Board and asked them to advise the council about whatever the particular issue is, and then the Environment Committee Board appoints a subcommittee that gets to work on the issue. And so I guess I'm wondering, would we have to restart that, or would that be a different kind of issue than what you're envisioning here?
Councilmember Kelly, you want to respond?
I think any discussions would pick up where they left off, but I think if it's like a formal sort of referral that that was requested to act on legislatively, that would simply be a matter of submitting to referral, but the conversation would pick up exactly where it's left off. There'd be no reason to restart whatever has been begun here with this council. I mean, it's not like we would ignore any previous conversations. But if it was a legislative matter that was put before the previous one and had gone a legislative route that included, committees, but of course, again, any information gathered would still be valid and useful.
Councilmember Newsma.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This sounds reasonable, but I'm wondering, is there an actual problem that needs solving? I'm not sure there is, and I wonder what the unintended consequences might be. I'm speculating about, towards the end of the term of a council, that things maybe don't grind to a halt, but activity really slows down because we're not sure who's going to be on the dais in the next month. We have so much to do. I don't think we should be slowing down at any point. So I do have that concern, although this does sound like a reasonable rule. So a little bit of a mixed bag on that. So that's all. Thanks.
Councilmember Sufferton.
Sure. I'll just share my experience in Springfield. Bills all die when the General Assembly adjourns, and they can be reintroduced by members of the new General Assembly. I think the problem that this is seeking to address, which may not be an active problem, would be outgoing council members who have not been reelected introducing items which then go forward when they're no longer part of the council. So the same mechanism would exist here if you had a council member who had a proposed ordinance who was not going to be on the next council, that ordinance could still go forward if it were picked up by a member of the following council. I'm not speaking for Councilmember Kelly, but I presume that that is her intent, would be for there not to be agenda items that exist without the sponsorship of an existing member of the current city council that were introduced by members of the previous council. So it doesn't stop the work either, in the interim between the election and the swearing into the new council. If you were a person who knew you would not be here, you could line up a sponsor on the next council. Or if you're a person who knew that you'd be continuing, your idea may have to be reintroduced as an item on the next council's agenda. But what it comes down to is, I believe, what we're seeking to have is not have concepts moving forward without any current member of the council supporting them, but taking up staff time and taking up agenda time. And so this would prevent that while still allowing for a member of the following council to pick up sponsorship and carry them forward.
Councilmember Ravel.
Well, just one more example that came to mind. I know we're going to be embarking on a major comprehensive plan process and a zoning overhaul, and that's going to be, we won't be finished with that by the time this council has finished its term. So I guess, would that have to be re-referred? It just seems, that would seem unnecessary.
Councilmember Kelly, if you want to respond to that, and then Councilmember.
No,
Reed.
that wouldn't, just like a development, if a developer put through a proposal, that would be an ordinance. That wouldn't, also just like, if we had had an RFP and we approved a comprehensive plan work, that would be a similar, maybe, I don't know if someone else wants to speak to that, but something like that would not die if we had begun a comprehensive plan project, just like if a developer had put through a proposal, that wouldn't be set back. That wouldn't be a legislative action per se that a council member was putting forward as an ordinance, say.
Point of information. I do think those are two different things. Well, one, I'll just, Councilmember Burns or Chair Burns.
Yes, Councilmember Reed.
All right, I'll just use my time. I do think there is a difference between what you just mentioned there, Councilmember Kelly. I do think, obviously, we don't make referrals for planned developments or for developments, and so a development would not be in the process. I get that you're referring to the RFP already having gone through, but, let's say someone here makes a referral to act on some of the recommendations from that comprehensive planning process. I won't name any specifics, but just anything, it would seem as though we'd have to, again, re-refer that. Now, I hear what Councilmember Suffredin was saying. I will note, I'm not super read up on this, but I don't think that Springfield is seen as a continuous body the way that a city council is. It's maybe neither here nor there, not super important, but I do think that there could be. I mean, we don't just require one person to make a referral anymore. We require 3 people to make a referral. And so, again, I see the merit in this referral, and I just wonder if there's a way to tweak this a bit to avoid some of the unintended consequences that Councilmember Nusma and I think Ravel are both alluding to. And so I wonder if, at one of the first meetings of the new council at Rules Committee or the Referrals Committee, maybe the Referrals Committee is tasked with, at a meeting after an election, of going through the referrals and determining which ones still have a valid sponsor on the council. So I can get to yes to this. I do think tweaking a few of the words. I don't have the language in my head now. I don't know if you're, or maybe, what I would like to tweak in my head.
Before we move forward, if we can go to Council Cummings.
I just had a clarifying question along those same lines. So, for example, an ordinance comes before this council in late April, the second meeting in April. for introduction. It'd be for action at the next meeting. Technically, this body would still meet and then adjourn, and then the new council is sworn in that meeting. But what I'm wanting to know is if you have an ordinance that is introduced, and the next vote would be by the next council to be for action, is this meant to kill that if it's already been introduced, or would it still go forward for action? And I think that's kind of what Councilmember Ravel was trying to talk, maybe get into, especially with like the comprehensive plan, zoning ordinances, right? So this body votes to introduce them, and then do they die after introduction, or do they still get voted on for, for action?
Councilmember Kelly.
So I think it is, I mean, one of the objectives is to bring things to closure before the end of a term, right? Because we are a democratic body, people elect their officials because of their points of view, because they feel they represent whatever reasons that they vote for them. And so I would say that yes, if something comes up, that, like I gave the example of the elimination of the Board of Ethics, as I wanted to keep it, and that was something that was brought for introduction. We carried on with it. I would say it's simply one more meeting. It would have to it would have to be referred. In this case, this would have to come back if it's a general comprehensive plan that we're voting on. It would come back for introduction only with the new council, as it should, as opposed to introduction by the old one, however they vote, and then the next one would pick it up for action. It would simply be postponed and come back for introduction with the, however, the legislative process would be for, I've never been through a comprehensive plan, so I can't speak to that in great detail, but certainly, there were several items, I know even like the Northwestern extending its commercial use. I can't remember it was something that we had at the very end too, where it was voted on for, it was an ordinance extending the expiration date, I think, for Northwestern's commercial use. And that was brought up for introduction, and then we, picked it up from there. And again, that to me should have either been finished or brought back to us to consider. But it doesn't push it back that, we're not talking a huge time lapse there. But yes, I hope that answers your question.
Councilmember Newsome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think where I'm heading here is some wording along the lines of any ordinances or resolutions resulting from council and mayoral referrals that have not been introduced by the end of a term die. That leaves open referrals coming from city staff, the city manager. We wouldn't want to kill those. And I think the comprehensive plan is probably one such referral. And this ties it to referrals coming from members of this body and knowing that that membership is going to change.
And by introduce, just a question of clarification. Do you mean hasn't gone through the referrals process, hasn't been on the committee agenda yet?
It's gone through the referrals process. I said introduced, I meant formally introduced as an agenda item on our.
So it hasn't been on the agenda yet?
Right.
If it's appeared on an agenda,
It's
then
appeared
that
on the
wouldn't apply.
agenda. To Council Cummings' point, if something can be introduced, an ordinance can be introduced by the previous council and then acted upon by the next council. But if an item has not appeared on the agenda.
Okay, there we go. That's what I was looking for. If it's appeared on the agenda, it's excluded from the language that you're talking about. The language that he's talking about right now.
That's
All
what
right.
I'm suggesting.
And I would like to, if we can start to be more specific about what we would like to see, because I think we all understand the context in which this discussion is being had. So just let's start to say exactly what we would like to see in the ordinance. Councilman Reed, you're next up.
Right. I think I like the direction that Councilmember Newsom is going. Maybe it's, a referral must have a lead sponsor who is still on the dais, and that's the way to solve it. Or maybe every referral, if it hasn't been acted on in 2 years, expires. So those are directions that I'm going. Either it's required that the lead sponsor is still on the council or a new lead sponsor is chosen. And it doesn't have to be re-referred, just someone picks up his lead sponsor. Maybe there's just a flat, if it hasn't been acted on in 2 years, then it expires. I think one of those two routes. That way, if there is something that has been referred, the referrals committee has met, it's maybe gone to some committee but hasn't appeared as for introduction for council yet, you don't have to go through the referrals process and have, there would be a delay because the referrals committee would have to meet, they'd have to assign it, their meeting schedule plus the meeting schedule of what committee it goes to. So I do think one of those two options in alignment with what Councilmember Newsom is saying makes sense.
Councilmember Kelly.
So, well, I can live with that. And the one little issue, though, I see is like in principle, something should not have been acted on if it had died based on the previous council. So there shouldn't be action moving forward on items that are carried over from a previous council. But I also want to say you can also sponsor you can have one sponsor. Like you don't have to have, it doesn't have to be sponsored by 3 aldermen to move something forward. So I think
I think it does.
no, I mean, if you want to move more expedited, it's 3, but
No, I think the rule is flat, must have a
must have
sponsor
3?
and 2
Okay,
co-sponsors.
I
Okay,
think, yeah.
all right. I thought it could be 1, but it just means it wouldn't be put to the end of the queue. Okay, so, I mean, so the only problem I have, Jonathan, Councilmember Newsom, if I'm understanding, you're saying that somehow it could sort of move along legislatively without picking up sponsors from a previous term? Can you explain what you're?
And before you go, Councilmember News, I would like to jump in because I think this is a good time for me to jump in with my comments. I think, again, the rules are you need 3. So I think just to keep it simple, if those 3 remain, then something should be allowed to move forward. I mean, we could consider 1, but I think just to stay in alignment with our current rules.
Okay,
As long
understood.
as you have the sponsors you need to move something forward, it should be allowed to move forward without having to go back, to the start, in my opinion. Councilmember Newsom.
So, sorry, your question was? Okay.
I
Yeah,
don't
so
know
my
if that's
thought
what
was to
Councilmember Newsom's thought. was,
allow
but, yeah.
whatever hypothetical piece of legislation, an ordinance that has been introduced by the old council will not die. The new council can take action. They can take action without having to re-refer it, without having to go through the process. If either an ordinance or a resolution has not appeared in front of a council, then it dies. I guess
Council,
what we're saying
committee,
now.
you're saying council or committee, right? You're using council
I guess
loosely?
I'm
or
saying
just
council.
Okay.
Maybe we need to talk about committee, but, and then the new twist here is what if the same 3 sponsors are continuing on the new council, I think it makes sense to not have to re-refer it. What if it's not the same 3 sponsors, it's a different 3? But I would be fine not having to go through a re-referral process in that case.
Yeah, I
Although
would-
it'd be kind of just, bureaucratic, I suppose.
I agree. My other concern is that we operate as a council, but also our committee, the volunteers who serve on our committees put a lot of effort into preparing to discuss these issues. And so to have a committee of volunteers, work on something for months just to have it unnecessarily delayed is also a concern to me. So I would support what you're also saying, which is even if it's a new set of council members that want to take it up, that it can remain on the same schedule. Councilman Reed, and then
I
Kelly.
think I have a motion for this. I would move to amend this to say that all referrals that do not have 3 current members of the council as co-sponsors by the second meeting of the new council, or give some time frame, that those automatically, I hate that we're using the term die, but they automatically are no longer valid. And maybe that's a way to solve this, so that allows.
And we have time on this, so unless there's a majority of people here that feel like we need to pass something today, we could work on the language and bring something back to our next meeting, if that's okay, just so we can move on to the next item.
Sure.
Councilmember Kelly.
I'd be happy to work on that wording. I do want to keep the spirit of democracy present in this, in the sense that even if you had the same 3 on here and say it had gone through Human Services or whatever else with the majority in the last one, but now you have a different council where it may not have gone forward, to allow it to be an ordinance to now be coming before council for action just because the same three are there, I think does not follow the spirit, the democratic spirit intent of this. So I would say, yes, I agree with the three. If the three are still here, it wouldn't have to go through referrals. Yes, but it would go through the legislative process with the new term. So I'm happy to work on the wording and work with anybody who'd like to work with me on that. And we don't have to move this forward, and I'm happy to have this brought back at our next rules.
So if we can get a motion for a table or hold, whatever is appropriate.
I'll move to table this to our next Rules Committee meeting.
All right,
I'll
we have a
second.
motion that's been moved by Councilmember Reed, seconded by Councilmember Kelly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays, any abstentions? All right, the ayes have it. All right, next up, item R3.
I will move
Yeah.
item R3, Resolution 40R23, adoption of the civility pledge by the mayor and the city council.
All right, it's been properly moved. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Mayor Biss. City Manager, would you like to introduce this?
Sure, just very briefly. Good evening, Chair and members of the City Council. On April 20th, the Illinois Municipal League released a sample resolution and a draft civility pledge for municipalities around the state of Illinois to consider adopting. There's been challenges, especially in the past couple of years, around the state with decorum and engagement and so forth with elected officials and staff or other folks as well. So this was not in response to any one particular incident or any one person. This was just a matter of timing with the release in April of the Illinois Municipal League's pledge. And one of my most important responsibilities is to ensure that the staff is able to operate in a respectful and professional environment. And that is simply the goal of this civility pledge. And I would also add that that is also incumbent on staff as well, ensuring that we are operating in a respectful and professional manner, whether that's our interactions as well with the city council, members of the public, or each other as staff members.
All right, any discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays, any abstentions? Okay, that passes. Next up, if somebody can move R4, please.
I move R4 Ordinance 56023, adding Title I, Chapter 13, Section 5, Small Donor Matching System for Fair Elections.
Second.
It's been properly moved by Councilmember Hedekadis and seconded by Councilmember Reed. We're going to start off with Councilmember Hedekadis.
So I'm bringing this forward to the Rules Committee as a kind of a good government ordinance. I think, when you look at, this would be a pilot program that would be in our budget, a small fund that would be less than $1 per resident. And this would, allow the opportunity for some folks who might not can be able to run for the office of mayor to have a shot. I think this kind of opens up the field because I know all of us up here know that running for office is a difficult thing to do and requires means, and this will kind of level the playing field, so to speak.
Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. Here's a quote for Evanston now. A donor system like this, I think, would make it more possible for someone like myself to run for mayor, or someone who is not of wealth and means. And so I do think we need to work on leveling the playing field, which is the goal of this. I don't know if a small donor matching system is that system. I tend to prefer an alternative system, which is democracy dollars, which has been implemented in a few cities. And from my understanding, that policy has been shown to increase turnout amongst low propensity voters. And I think, at least from the first time that it was implemented, that there is a large increase in lower income voters who use those democracy dollars, which were, I think, $25 per resident that they could donate to a candidate of their choice. Maybe they got 4 $25 vouchers that they could donate to candidates of their choice. And I think that if we are going to, I think there's 2 outcomes. One, making it more possible for lower income or less connected folks to run for office. But 2, I think good election policy should try to increase turnout amongst low propensity voters. And the small donor matching system, from what I have seen, and please, if anyone has any data to the different than that, please share it with me. But from what I've seen, has not increased turnout amongst low propensity voters. It has, in some cases, maybe reinforced the donation habits of folks who are already likely to donate. And so I think the cap here is $250.
It is $150.
$150, and it would be matched up to that $150 how many times?
I think it is once. No.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I think it's, I'm sorry, I heard, is it 1 time, 4 times? Or 6 times? The donation will be matched up to, if you donate $25, is it matched $25 or is it matched $150?
The maximum an amount a candidate can receive from any one source is 150. So the matching, I would believe, has to be limited by that 150.
So if I donate,
Pretty key question here.
Yeah, Eleanor's right. It's
9 to 1, so if I give $25, it gets multiplied 9 times.
correct.
Limited at 150, or does it go over 150? And if I give 150, does that 150 get matched 9 times?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would just love for us to explore in a bit more detail the compare the cost of this versus democracy dollars and what we could anticipate the impact on voter turnout being with both of the systems. I really I admire this being put forward. I would just like us to
I messed up.
Oh.
It's matched up to 50.
up to $50.
Contribution is capped at 150, the matchable part is capped at 50.
Okay.
I apologize.
If I'll say it on the mic, so
I was
folks-
just
or
gonna ask
Mayor
if
Biss, if
somebody
you want to
could-
say it on the.
Yeah, if you could let us all know what we have here.
Yeah, sorry, I was doing that off mic on purpose to not. Anyway, so to qualify for matching, a contribution itself cannot exceed 150, but the matchable part is the first 50. So if you give 150, if you give 151, nothing's matched. If you give 150, the first 50 is matched. If you give 50, all of the 50 is matched. If you give 20, 20 is matched.
And if but as a candidate who's participating in this, I could not accept a contribution of $151, correct? Okay. And so, yes.
The multiplier is 9. The multiplier is 9.
You want to put your microphone on?
So somebody gets a check for $50.
Then it's matched with 450.
All right, somebody gets a check for $150.
It's matched with 450.
Somebody gets a check for $151.
It's not matched.
Somebody gets a check for $20.
And that person wouldn't be
Matched
able
with
to.
180.
Got it, okay.
Councilmember Suffolk.
Well, if I can just finish
Yeah.
my last question there, sorry. And then another concern that I have, if we were to move forward with this, again, I'm going to advocate hard for the democracy dollars, but do we change the way contributions are itemized at this point? Because under current state law, folks don't have to itemize a contribution that's under $150, and you have to itemize contributions over $150. And so with this multiplier, does that mean that the contribution technically is over $150, and then you itemize all of those? And I ask this because I do think it is important for transparency. If we're claiming that folks are donating, $50 and it's being matched. Where is that being reported?
Councilmember Sufferton.
That was an actual question for someone.
They'll be handled by the clerk's office, which I know Clerk Mendoza's had discussions with, and maybe Corporate Counsel Cummings could.
We've had some discussions. I know she's had some discussions with Deputy City Attorney Ruggie. But a lot of those discussions, admittedly, have been about implementation. So that could actually be something that would have to be ironed out.
And I would presume we'll go to council next, so I figured we have some time to iron out some of this.
I would hope that we don't move this forward quite yet.
Okay, Councilmember Sufferton.
Sure. Yeah, it says it's for action. So this is a question for the sponsor. You and I talked today, at the federal level, there's the $3 option that income taxpayers have where the money goes into a pool and that pool is decided, but it's voluntary. What would you say to a taxpayer who's being compelled to financially support a candidate who they may not agree with? Because there is no opt-out of this, and there's no opt-in. This is just city money going to candidates. And so as a taxpayer, you would be financially supporting a candidate with whom you may not agree.
I would tell that person that they're supporting the election process and it's less than $1. I know that's hard.
But they're not supporting the election process. They're supporting a particular candidate with their money. This isn't money that's going to have more forums or increase judging, anything. This is money that will go directly to a candidate that is coming out of a taxpayer's pocket without their consent.
Well, one of the things, there's a provision in there, if you want to participate in the program, you have to participate in at least 2 public forums, debate forums. And so that's currently not required. I think that opens up more discussion around the election process. And I think maybe that would be the benefit for someone that, maybe they don't support that one candidate that's getting their $1, but it is giving them the opportunity to hear, I think it's like 2 hours of debate on the issues, which might not happen unless
So a
they
candidate
opt in.
who doesn't take this money has to participate in those
No,
forums
they
too?
don't.
So you would end up possibly with just one person making a speech for 2 hours, and that would satisfy that requirement?
If you don't have an opponent, you don't get the money either.
Right, but if you have let's say there are 2 candidates for mayor. One takes this money, one doesn't. Candidate who didn't take the money doesn't have to participate in any forums, but you have the other candidate who must participate in a forum. What happens then?
I think people see that they're not participating. I mean,
I'm just saying, look, I think this is well intentioned, but I think there's work that needs to be done on it. And I think, it's one thing to put conditions on money that somebody takes, but by extension, you're putting conditions on everyone else running for the office of mayor to participate in these forums that are to satisfy the requirement for somebody who took money, which again is taxpayer money that could be spent on any number of other things. We would be, if we approve this, choosing to spend it to support the candidacies of individuals. And I think that's where the issue is. And this isn't, again, and we talked about this earlier, you and I today. I mean, and the other issue is that this is not money that's, like in the federal system where you agree to throw $3 in a pool and whoever gets it, gets it. Whether or not you agree with them, you've decided that you value the access to funds enough that you're willing to put $3 in there. This is like, it's been decided for you by the city council that you will be supporting candidates with whom you may not agree. And for that reason, unless we fix that, I would be a no. And I would recommend that everyone else be as well.
Councilmember Nusma and then Mayor Biss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have another concern regarding the limits on contributions. Let me pull up my notes, but somewhere in the proposed ordinance, there was a prohibition on lobbyists making campaign contributions to mayoral candidates. And I am concerned about the lack of a definition of a lobbyist. And I think that's really important. We don't want anybody who appears in front of city council in public comment or is just exercising their First Amendment rights to petition their elected official to be classified as a lobbyist. So, yeah, it looks like Mayor Biss is ready to address that concern.
Mayor Biss.
Yeah, I mean, I won't address it in a very satisfactory way. That provision, which obviously makes a lot of sense when you hear it, was drafted because a state law was passed requiring a statewide registry of municipal lobbyists. The problem is, with all respect to our friends in Springfield, that hasn't been implemented to a point yet where it's easy to just go to a statewide searchable database and figure out whether an individual donor or produce, for example, a list of Evanston lobbyists. So I would suggest, or at least I would at least recommend considering stripping that out of the ordinance at this time, just because it's not really feasible, with the idea that if that statewide database becomes functionally usable for this purpose, then we might want to reintroduce that component back in.
Your microphone's off.
The definition, thank you. The portion of this ordinance does refer to the definition of lobbyists under the Illinois Lobbyist Registration Act, which Mayor Biss is referring to. So however that ordinance defines it, however, I will admit, I had this conversation with some of my colleagues who are corp counsel in other villages. Sometimes that definition is a bit vague. So it could be read and misinterpreted to mean someone who approaches you in the grocery store here in Evanston, that they're lobbying you based upon the way it was written. And they're not a certified lobbyist, right? So
that's my concern. I understand that, for the purposes of state lobbying, there's a fairly robust system that identifies lobbyists, and you can look those up. But if I'm understanding correctly, the law, and maybe it's the same law that sets up that system at the state level, has not effectively been implemented for registering local lobbyists.
So, the point is it's not the same law. It was passed much more recently.
Okay, it's not the same law.
Yeah.
And is either one of which one of those laws is 25 ILCS 170? That's the local one, or is that the state one?
I mean, it might be that they might both be in that same statutory citation, but they're different. The statewide lobbyist registration has existed for decades. The municipal one is just sort of getting off the ground, essentially.
Right. So I think the mayor's idea of just striking this section unless and until there's an effective statewide system.
And not to advocate to keep it in, but there's also a sentence in the ordinance that says the city council may adopt additional rules and regulations defining what constitutes a lobbyist.
Thanks.
Mayor Biss, you had the floor next. Do you have any additional comments?
I just wanted to respond to a previous question. It's Monday. Yesterday, I had the great pleasure of speaking at the Pride Parade that we had city personnel, a number of police officers were there to make it safe. There were street closures. We expended city resources. There's people in this community I know who are opposed to that movement and wish that hadn't occurred. But we don't give them a choice about whether or not their tax dollars get to go to fund that kind of activity. We make a variety of policy determinations about what's best for our community and deploy resources accordingly. A lot of places, I think this is a really good idea, but it's not an avant-garde idea. A lot of places are doing this very form of effort to deal with the flood of money that's coming into campaigns and frankly, negatively impacting governance. And I think there's no way of doing that successfully unless you utilize, with the current Supreme Court and its current interpretations of the relationship between money and speech and politics, without using public funds as a counterweight. And so I hear the objection, but I think we've got to make I don't think that's like a defect in this to be fixed. I think that's a reality that we need to decide whether or not we want to accept. I would strongly urge accepting that reality. It may feel uncomfortable in certain edge cases, but I think it's the only way to solve this problem, and I think it's a big and growing problem. And I want to be really clear, because this is about elections for mayor and mayor only. For me, and for my political well-being, this is bad news, right? All this is going to do is make it harder for incumbents with big fundraising networks to get reelected. I think we really ought to pass it. And I'm happy and proud to be a test case, sort of putting myself out there as the incumbent, willing to expose myself to a new kind of risk, because I think the way in which money affects our political system across the country is dangerous, and we've got to do something.
Councilmember Hadakatis, did you have any other comments?
I was just going to respond to Councilmember Reed, because we've had discussions around the democracy dollars and the vouchers, which I think is also a very exciting, concept. I think for me personally, when weighing small donor match was an easier number to figure out. I think the potential expenditure in like the democracy dollars, it's like, well, like what would the budget number be? And given that this is like a pilot with the mayoral elections, that's was my thinking that small donor match was the way to go. But I do appreciate that maybe something in the future we can look at for aldermanic races too. But yeah.
Councilmember Reed and then Kelly.
Thank you. I would like us to table this here at Rules, to think about it more. And whether it's tabled or not, I do think one thing that is important for us to look at is, one, I don't believe there's any, and Evanston is quite often a first, but I don't believe there's any community in Illinois that uses any kind of matching system. And I would ask the legal department, and I think there's a reason for that, not just because other communities aren't as brave and bold as we are and progressive as we are, which sometimes is the case. I believe that the Illinois Constitution has a prohibition against using tax dollars to support campaigns. And so I would just like the law department to look into that, particularly Article 7 of the Illinois Constitution, and the Illinois ILCS, Illinois Compiled Statute 10, sections 5, 9, 25, to determine whether or not we feel that this would comport with state law and our home rule authority under state law.
Councilmember Kelly.
Could you provide that citation to me by email or something? Thank you.
So I just want to have a little bit more clarity on expense here. So I see in the memo, it says that we would be, annual budget would be $68,750 and $50,000 to the clerk's office. It also mentions a maximum of $81,000 per candidate in the let's see, I just want to get some clarity on what we're talking about expense-wise. It looks like $81,000, the aggregate amount of matching fund payments that may be made to a participating candidate may not exceed $81,000. So I'm a little confused about, it looks like once, and then there's another clause that says once the total amount that's budgeted has been depleted, then no more money should be allocated. So there's a little bit of a race, right, then also involved to get your small donors in so that you can get that money before it's depleted. So I guess my question is, one, the $81,000 here, how many times could that be allocated?
Well, I guess part of the provision is we'd have this in the budget, so the fund would grow. So it wouldn't just be the one-time payment. But yeah, once you get the 81,000, that's the cap.
For one
So,
person? But
For
it-
one person.
Okay, so you
I
could
mean,
have,
I mean,
I
we don't
know
know. We
that's-
could potentially have, I don't know if we'd have 4 mayoral candidates raised.
right,
then.
I don't know either. I'm just trying to understand the budgetary ramifications, just to get a better grasp of what it means.
But I think
budgetarily.
at least my reasoning would be if you had that initial amount, which almost covers the 81,000 for one candidate, after 2 years, you'd be at like, bad at math, almost 140, but that would keep on growing. And if the candidates do not spend that money, that comes back into the fund. There's a mechanism there that if it's not spent, it comes back. So I would imagine it would be if all goes well, an ongoing pool of money, and then that would be adjusted over time.
Okay. Do we have any just general estimates based on last elections, what this would look like? Or maybe just to have an idea of what this would look like based on donations of $150 or less to different candidates, like what we're talking about in terms of?
Just point of information, those contributions under $150 are not itemized, and thereby we can't really track them, unfortunately.
So we don't have any way to just have an idea as to what we're talking about here.
I'm going to go Mayor Biss and then Councilman Ravel, and if we could close out either with, it seems like there might be a motion to table this, but Mayor Biss.
Yeah, two things. First, if the question is about the budgetary impact, it's $68,000. And it's not, if that money is depleted, if the fund is depleted, the city doesn't then automatically top it up. It's depleted, which could, as you say, generate a race, right? If the number of mayoral candidates, if the amount of available funds divided by the number of mayoral candidates is less than $81,000, then they would be sort of in a race to get what there was, which probably after the first cycle wouldn't occur. But in response to your other question about what it would have meant in previous elections, it's a good question, and it's annoying that we can't answer. But in point of fact, the whole purpose of this is to change behavior. And so knowing that wouldn't be that big a deal, because what you really want is to all of a sudden make it worth candidates' while to spend their time in a different way, talking with regular people who can't write the $500,000 check. And so you would hope that just multiplying the past by 9 wouldn't give you a complete picture.
Councilmember Ravel.
Well, my reading of the ordinance is that the 68,000 in the fund is per election. So between consolidated elections. So basically, for over 2 years, that would be the amount that was in there. I mean, I'd have to read through this again, but I did kind of wonder, so I did a little bit of online research to see there are a good handful of other municipalities around the country who have these small matching programs. What's interesting is it said that New York City has the highest matching fund ratio, which is only $6 to 1. So I was wondering how we got to $9 per $1 to be matched. And then a couple, we require even candidates who don't participate in the matching fund program are still required 90 days post-election to submit some kind of report to our city clerk. So I was kind of wondering why we are, if they didn't participate in the program, why we are requiring them to make some kind of disclosure to the city clerk. So that's a question. And then I guess I do have the same kind of question that Councilmember Kelly had, which was that, we could pretty soon get to the point where that total, that 68,000 has been allocated, and people are still, it's early in the whole election cycle, and if you get going really early, you're in good shape, but otherwise, no.
So similar to one of our last issues, I think we have time on this, and so if we could, I would recommend as chair seeing as how many questions we have, if we can get a motion to table this.
Sure. We can table till the next Rules Committee.
I'll second.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays, any abstentions? Okay. One nay? One nay. Okay, next up, we have R5. If somebody wants to make a motion.
I will move item R5, ordinance 58023, amending Title I, Chapter 13, Section 4, wards and precincts of the Evanston City Code.
Second.
Been properly moved by Councilmember Reed and seconded by Councilmember Hedekadis. Councilmember Nusma, if you want to introduce.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess when we last met at the redistricting committee, we didn't realize this had to make a stop at rules before it got to council. So here we are. This is an intermediate step. I gave a presentation to council on April 10th. The map at that point had a total population deviation of 3.35%. Based on an additional round of public feedback, the committee made some changes to the map, and the current map that the committee has recommended to council for approval has a total population deviation of 2.57%. So from that perspective, it's an improvement over the map that this council saw previously. This map continues to meet our three guiding principles. Number one, we continue to have 3 wards that are minority non-white. Number two, we have downtown Evanston represented by multiple council members. And number three, we have engaged in kind of a light touch approach here. So on behalf of the members of the redistricting committee, we submit this map to council or to the rules committee as an intermediate step before it goes to council for final approval. And I did just email some PDFs that maybe should have been in the packet, a better version of the map and the demographic breakdown as well.
And this will go to council for final
So this
adoption.
does go to council. That's a question for
Yes.
Council Cummings.
So go to council.
In reviewing this body is what created the redistricting committee, so it needed to come back here. And previously, as Councilmember Nguyen probably will attest, this is the body that actually drew the maps previously. So that's why it's here today, and then it'll go to council on the 12th.
All right, seeing as we still have an opportunity to discuss this, I'd ask if we limit our comments. We'll go Councilmember Reed, but if we have one more item, it's 6 p.m. I'd like to start our next meeting shortly, but we have one more item. But Councilmember Reed? Nothing? Beautiful. All right, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays?
Just one, sorry.
Yes, sir.
My apologies.
Aye.
The map that was emailed by Councilmember Nusma will be the map that's in the council packet. The map that's in this packet is not going to be the map. I downloaded an older version and included it in this packet. So I just wanted to make the body aware.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? One nay. Okay, D1 item under item for discussion. Can someone please move item D1?
D1, setting an established start time for city council meetings.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Sufferton. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Nusma. Discussion. Councilmember Sufferton, you
Sure.
want to set this up?
Yeah, so, and I think we're actually doing this to people right now. The people in the ante room are here because they believe human services will start at 6 o'clock. We don't cap discussion at committees that precede city council meetings. City council meetings don't start at a defined time. We have people who are arriving at the published time expecting for city council to happen, who sit through extended discussion that's happening at the preceding committee meetings. As a practical matter, our council meetings don't really start until at least 45 minutes past the time we start because of public comment, mayoral announcements, and so forth. So in the interest of efficiency, I think it is worthy of our time to decide if we are comfortable with the status quo or if we want to make adjustments that would allow for a firm start time for city council meetings so that members of the public, people who have matters before the city council who are paying people to come and represent them, have a sense of when those meetings might start.
And we'll go a little bit out of order and just put my position on the record. I having listened to some of the concerns from my colleagues and also just reviewing some of the options, I think capping how long meetings go is something that I could get behind. I don't know how you feel about that, Councilman Sufferton, but even now, if it's 6 p.m. and it's time for the next meeting, we'll hold that item to the next meeting and revisit it then. I don't think that's out of order, and it doesn't add an additional day. So after reviewing all the options, I certainly would support that and would be open to any other ideas. But I think that's reasonable. Just say, look, if it starts at 6, we end it at 6, and then anything left on the agenda goes to the next meeting. Councilmember Reed, your light was on. Councilmember Hedekatis.
In talking with Councilmember Sufferton today, one of the things that I think would maybe help us hit that on-time start is maybe moving planning and development. That might be an option. That tends to be, there are certain meetings that have more discussion and need more discussion, but it might make sense to move that as, that can, we've had items that, me personally didn't think there would be tons of discussion, and the more you dig in, there needs to be, more information and direction on how to go. And this is a question, I think, for City Manager Stowe. I think, would it be possible to have designations for certain items that need to be acted on? So there could maybe be a priority set with certain agenda items that would need to be acted upon in that session versus ones that could maybe, wait 2 weeks or a month. So.
Sure, just briefly, I mean, I certainly think that there would be a way for our staff to be able to designate certain items that we feel are time sensitive and would not be able to wait till the next meeting.
Mayor Biss, or Councilmember, are you, Mayor Biss?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just two really quick things. First of all, I think doing something about this problem is a good idea. If we do just literally operationalize by rule a cutoff of meetings, I'd want to have clarity on what how that rule could be suspended, because you don't want to have it. You don't want to. Okay, the clock struck 5:45. We turned it to pumpkins, and now we can't make payroll next week or whatever. You'd want some escape valve, even if it's a unanimous vote of the committee to suspend that rule. You'd want some escape valve. And the other thing I just want to say, I haven't ever said this. I've said this privately to a lot of people. I've never said it out loud, and certainly not into a microphone. But now, since we're on this conversation, I want to get on the record. I find the system where we have a council meeting, and right before it, we have 2 committee meetings that go through essentially the entire council agenda with, in one case, 7/9 of the same people, in the other case, 5/9 of the same people, and repeat all these discussions with the same people on the same evening. I find that suboptimal, and I've never felt like it was worth picking a fight about. But if we want to reopen the question of sort of how to be most efficient with our time, I just want to at least name the fact that that doesn't seem to be the most efficient way to handle things.
Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a case where there is a problem that needs solving, so I'm glad we're talking about potential solutions here. I'm not a fan of a hard stop for a committee meeting because we need as much time as we need to have those discussions, and sometimes ANPW meetings have gone on longer than anticipated. P&D maybe more so, but we can't say ANPW is always quick and easy too. So as much as I would like to minimize the impact on the calendar and spend as much time as possible with my family, I think moving ANPW and P&D to different evenings are probably the solution I would prefer.
Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate Councilmember Sufferton for making this referral. I too think it's an issue. As city clerk for the previous term, I certainly had my fair share of residents raise this issue with me. I personally think it might even be an Open Meetings Act concern that we sometimes start council hours after the posted start time. I think one thing that has to be named is that the big concern is that we are a part-time council. I mean, if we weren't a part-time council, we could have meetings every day of the week, and it wouldn't be a huge issue. And so I think we just need to keep that in mind, particularly as we move into the next term. I too would support, given what Mayor Biss said and Councilmember Nusma's concerns, I too think it would be nice to have some time between a committee meeting where things are introduced and the council meeting where those items are actually adopted. So I would be supportive of moving the committee meetings to another day. I would also be supportive of setting a hard stop time or start time for council. And if we have to, adjourn meetings to the next day or a future date, I think that's okay. I think we can go either one of these routes. I think I would prefer moving the committees to another day. Thank you.
Councilmember Kelly.
I think, Mayor Biss, your point is well taken about the same council members voting sometimes 3 times or over twice from each group, the P&D and AP&W, but those are usually in the consent agenda. So it's generally, unless it gets pulled off, most of those items are pretty much just voted through. So I do think that focus time is probably important on P&D and APW. So I would agree. I think if we could move those to a different evening, that would make more sense.
Yeah, I think the issue we're going to run into is that there are other committee meetings on different nights. I think the only day that would probably make sense is a Monday, and then we're basically every Monday we'd have some type of standing or council meeting, which I think is what was recommended in the packet. And certainly if this body is interested in that, we can move forward. But I think all the other nights, there's committee meetings that are happening in the evening, most other nights, and I think it would be difficult to figure out where this could fit. I want to be clear that even on this agenda, there were at least 2, maybe 3 items that we didn't have to get through all tonight, that we probably could have held discussion on until the next meeting and would not have been worse off because of it. So I think regardless of what we do, just better managing of the time that we do have is a good first step before we start looking at different days for meetings. So I just want to be clear, we wouldn't be limiting discussion, Councilmember Newsom. We would simply be saying, okay, let's be kind of judicious with the time that we have here, understand when we can move something to the next meeting and then pick it up where we left off. Again, there was at least 2 items that aren't urgent at all that we could have cut discussion a bit early to move it to the next meeting, and I think we would have been fine. Councilmember Sufferton, I believe, is next.
Yeah, and Nick, tell me if this is not possible under our rules, but I believe, we've gotten into this tradition of going late. We don't always have to do that. We could recess committees and then reconvene them after the completion of the city council meeting. And then you don't have to have a hard stop. You don't have to have a meeting on another night.
That's correct. Robert's rules and the city council rules would allow, there's several mechanisms that would allow for that to happen. But Robert's rules would allow for recess and reconvene, even on a different day, even if it doesn't have to be that same night. There's also a mechanism you could add a time to the agenda. So once the agenda is adopted at the beginning of the meeting, if the agenda says that you end at 9 o'clock, you have to terminate your meeting at 9 o'clock unless there's a motion to amend the agenda or suspend that portion of the agenda. So there's many mechanisms that could allow this to be effective and work.
Councilmember Ravel.
I guess one other option to suggest that I would like to suggest is maybe if we're moving P&D, for example, to another non-council night, maybe it only needs to meet once a month. It could meet, and we could have marathon session, because the items that come to P&D do need a lot of discussion, but they're usually not super time sensitive. So they could, so that, anyway, that's one, so that we don't, I'd like us to not have to move human services to a Tuesday. I'd like us to see if we can't keep everything on a Monday night.
Chair.
Councilmember Win- Yes,
Chair Burns, just
Council Cummings.
briefly, because it's come up a couple of times. In reviewing of the city code when it comes to P&D, there are some items that go to P&D that don't need to. And so staff has been looking at and talking with City Manager Stowe and the mayor about not sending them to P&D anymore because they shouldn't be going to P&D anyway, according to the city code. But we just send them to P&D. So that could help shorten some of your P&D meetings. They would go straight from the Land Use Commission to City Council because that's the way it's written in the code. But we've been not doing that.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Yes, we have actually, in the past, and I'm not actually saying that the past was better, but in the past, we limited the number of council members on ANPW to 4, and then the other 5 council members served on P&D, and the meetings met simultaneously. So that the 2 committees started at 5, and if you had an item at ANPW that you wanted to make sure you heard or spoke on, then it was around the corner. You would cross the hall and speak and then go back to your meeting. I won't say that that actually allowed us to successfully start our meetings on time, but I think that it's a possibility that if you knew you had a hard stop and you had 2 hours, then you use the 2 hours. Another possibility is of suggesting on the agenda the amount of time that something should take for discussion, and then move on after that. So all of us on the committee can see, all right, this one is going to take 10 minutes, this one's taking 20 minutes, and we tailor our comments so that we conclude within that time period.
Councilmember Nusler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask staff about, I was going to ask the city manager, I was going to ask the city manager about impact on staff. Before I get to that, I want to address Councilmember Nguyen's thoughts about simultaneous meetings, which would be a good way of getting more done in a limited period of time. I'm wondering about the impact in, the era of live streaming, staff's ability to live stream both, and folks who might be interested in discussions happening at both committees would have to pick and choose. So that might not be the best option from that perspective.
It would be hard to televise.
Yeah.
It was before we did that.
Yeah. But to my original question, this is for City Manager Stowe. Right now, we have Monday night meetings, 2nd and 4th Mondays of the month. Staff has that on their calendar. They block out those Monday nights. They're not planning to do anything but stick around the Civic Center, or at least be available online until, in some cases, midnight. If we were to move ANPW or P&D to a different Monday, they would have to be available for those Mondays as well as for the council meetings as well. So this would be an imposition on staff, is what I'm getting at. And I want to make sure that we wouldn't be asking too much of staff.
Sure, Councilmember, thank you for that question, and it has been something that we've thought about as well. There certainly is a handful of city employees that this probably would impact and would compel them to be at potentially 40-some Monday night meetings in a given year. I am hopeful that for some staff members, especially if you were to go to P&D maybe once a month, that might be helpful for those folks. With the ability to have staff also participate remotely, there may be cases where they don't have to be here on certain evenings, so they can just be available via Zoom. The other hope is that by going to this model, potentially, we're also ending at 8 or 9 o'clock at night and not ending at midnight. So there's also advantages there for staff and council.
Thanks.
Councilmember Harris.
Thank you. So I think it's a number of things. My sorority, we do put time limits, so I appreciated you saying that on our items where you get so much time. But I think we, as a council, have to govern ourselves. And I know we all want to be heard, it's important, but I've received quite a few emails where people say, we only get 2 minutes, but you all get a half an hour to talk about something. We need to govern ourselves appropriately. We need to come on time. We need to come. And then we need to do the business. I think if we deal with all of those and possibly change P&D, we will be a better governing body.
Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that, one, as Councilmember Nguyen noted, to a degree, this has been a problem for decades. It's not a new problem. It's been a problem in previous councils. My 4 years as city clerk, it was a problem at just about every meeting, it felt like. And so I think the real thing is trying something new. And I think that new thing would be moving our meetings to another day. I just want to make sure that staff has clear direction. This is for discussion, and I imagine it's coming back to rules, or is it going straight to council? And so I don't know if we've given clear direction on what path we want to take going forward. And so I am going to move that we.
Just real quick, Councilmember Sufferton, as the person that referred this, do you have any direction after hearing the discussion?
I just want us to, if we say we're starting at 6:30, start at 6:30. Whatever makes the most sense and is least disruptive to everybody. I mean, I think having the option to recess committees works. Changing nights sounds a little bit more complicated, but it could work. Simultaneous committees could work. You know, and I don't really care how we get there, but I think like people who come here at 7 expecting a city council meeting have a right to have a city council meeting that starts at 7, or 7 substantively starts at 7:50 after public comment and everything. But
so, Councilman Reed, I was felt like you were going to make a motion. Can you just work with staff to bring something back to our next Rules Committee meeting? I'll be chair, and I commit to making sure whatever is worked on collaboratively by this body makes it back on the next Rules Committee agenda.
I don't want to. This is Councilmember Sufferton's referral.
I think he just opened it up.
Yeah,
sure. Okay.
The goal
yes.
is
yes. Then yes, I am happy to work with
Very
staff
good.
between now and the next meeting.
So that item was for discussion. So seeing no further matters before us, I call the meeting adjourned.